Hey there, welcome to the Film Fan Club show. I'm Sam Carrico. Wow, we are learning a lot more about the upcoming Spider-Man movie. Alfred Molina seemingly confirmed his return as Dr. Octopus in a new interview, telling Variety his story takes place right where it left off in 2004's Spider-Man 2, which I can only interpret as meaning that he'll be playing a corpse. Or at least maybe that's what the 67-year-old actor will look like when they try to digitally change his face. Speaking of looking like a corpse, we've got more news on the Indiana Jones movie. Mads Mikkelsen has joined the cast of the upcoming fifth film opposite Harrison Ford and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Little is known about the plot or Mikkelsen's role here, but I don't know about you guys, something tells me he's gonna play a villain. I don't know, that's just a hunch though. No, but I'm really excited actually today. This is our last show before the 2021 Academy Awards on Sunday. Yeah, I know, the producers of the Oscars were really insistent on making sure that at least part of the ceremony was held indoors with other people, together, because some things are just essential, like the Oscars. Like I said though, this is our last show before the awards, so I thought it was appropriate to make some predictions, and we've got some great contenders for Best Picture this year. Between Judas and the Black Messiah and Trial of the Chicago 7, a lot of these nominees highlight the struggle people of color go through and really try to lift up their voices, which is why I fully expect the award will probably go to something like Mank or Nomadland. We'll be talking more about the Trial of Chicago 7 today on the show. I thought the movie was really well done. It's a true story from the 1960s. It's about protests, it's got the Black Panthers, there's some police brutality involved, just all stuff you would never see in Chicago today. But I'd be remiss if I moved forward without at least mentioning a tremendous loss for Hollywood lately. The actor best known for his role as Nosferatu was laid to rest on Friday, in Great Britain of all places. I wasn't sure why, but... Oh, I'm sorry, I'm told that was just Prince Philip. Okay, we've got a great show for you lined up. John Leon and Ben Burgis are here to talk about Trial of the Chicago 7. Let's get right to it. All right, let's meet our panel. He is a columnist for Jacobin Magazine, author of Give Them an Argument, and host of the Give Them an Argument show. Ben Burgis is here.
Hey Sam, how you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks. Also here is John Leon. He's a recovering photojournalist and video editor. Hey, John.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're talking about Trial of the Chicago 7 and Aaron Sorkin a little bit more because he's been nominated for Best Picture this year. Ben, you wrote a really good article for Jacobin. What kind of stood out to you about Aaron Sorkin's style in general?
I mean, I think that Aaron Sorkin is very good at some things, and this is something that I know that since this is 2021 and a lot of cultural commentary, we all kind of need to sort people into good in every way and bad in every way, but he is actually legitimately good at some aspects of writing and storytelling, and I think that a lot of that comes through in big parts of Trial of the Chicago 7. A lot of it comes through in the West Wing episode I rewatched to do this. I mean, there are also things about him as a writer and storyteller that are weird and clunky, but there are things that he's very good at. But his worldview is definitely, like you said. I mean, it's just pure Clintonite, liberalism. It's all about having the right people who are morally good and technocratically competent, being on top of the system and making decisions, and the content of those decisions is almost beside the point, for Sorkin. And I think that's going to come out in everything we talk about today.
Going off of The West Wing a little bit, and he's done a lot of other stuff, The Newsroom, and even The Social Network is one of my favorite films. But kind of what are some of the recurring traits? We'll go to you about this, John. You also saw this West Wing episode that we're talking about. What kind of stands out to you that is kind of recurring throughout Sorkin's various works?
There's a lot of good emotion and stuff in it, and it works. But when you think about it, it's a little weird. That episode that we watched, the season 2 finale, I think, a large part of that episode is about his secretary who's been a servant to him basically since he was a boy in Harvard, and how she got him into politics by pushing him to engage with his dad, who was the authority. But it doesn't actually outline whether or not his engagement with his dad got any results at the school that he works at.
So it was before Harvard even. I mean, this was at prep school, and it's like a schmancy old school prep school where everybody wears uniforms. A big part of the episode's about the allegedly non-denominational, Christian service everybody has to go to, which, as he points out, is not really non-denominational because it's very Protestant. So that certainly gives you a sense of the school, and yeah, I mean, Mrs. Landingham, his secretary, she was, as you say, right? I mean, she's essentially a servant, this whole time, right? She worked for him for several decades, apparently, is the impression you get in one form or another, and never rose beyond just kind of being his personal secretary, but in very Aaron Sorkin fashion, especially for Aaron's, frankly, not to sound like whatever this sounds like, but I mean, especially for women who are written by Aaron Sorkin, her role is to be somebody who banters with the hero and kind of inspires him to do better, and and all of that stuff. Like he's the focus of everything, but she's supposed to be there as as a catalyst, which is a very common thing for women in shows and movies written by Sorkin.
Mm-hmm. And there's kind of a recurring theme of like the right and wrong way to go about creating and enacting change in a Sorkin universe. What stood out to you about the depiction of like protest and civil unrest and going against authority throughout Sorkin's works?
One of the things about that is that, honestly, Trial of Chicago 7, for Sorkin, it was a shockingly positive depiction of protests. Like, in general, if you see a protester, in most Sorkin stuff, it's it's a pretty negative depiction. Protesters and activists, are seen as sort of like childish, angry people who don't really understand how things work. So, for example, there's a West Wing episode where they, that was from, it's certainly at least depicting that era, kind of, end of the 90s, beginning of the O's, before 9/11, the battle for Seattle, kind of anti-globalization protest era. And in that episode, there's like a trade summit, and Toby has to go, like, is assigned to the drudgery task of going to talk to the protesters. And the whole episode's entirely about how, like, these people are idiots, but like he really needs to be willing to to talk at them, to enlighten them about why free trade is useful. And in the Newsroom, which you mentioned, which is a way worse show than The West Wing, because The West Wing, kind of some of the stuff that John was referring to, like it's got like The West Wing has characters and atmosphere, and oftentimes there's some sort of emotional core to whatever the story is in a given episode. Whereas The Newsroom, I think maybe because it's about stuff that happened like a year before, each season's happening, it's just an editorial. The characters are just stick figures, and it's just Sorkin talking about whatever's going on in the news. And so in there they have a depiction of Occupy Wall Street, and it's exactly like, right, the depiction of the anti-globalization protesters in the West Wing. But in Trial of the Chicago 7, maybe because it's Vietnam era, and so like this is stuff I think probably Sorkin himself is a little bit too young to have quite been around for, but not much too young for it. Right, like he maybe sort of caught the tail end of all that, and so maybe he just sort of has a residual soft spot, for Vietnam era, protest stuff. But for whatever reason, I think for Sorkin, it's not nearly as negative as those other ones. It might also, frankly, make a difference that they were. Even though the 1968 convention protest happened while LBJ was still president, that at least that this was going into Nixon being president, mm-hmm. And so there's a sort of awareness, like I think maybe the people who are being protested against are bad enough in Sorkin's view of the world that's kind of okay, whereas like anti-globalization protests, Clinton's president, and Occupy Wall Street, of course, Obama is president, you know, so then like you have the people who are the smart, compassionate technocrats in charge, so anybody who's still in the street, you know, must just kind of be a child.
Yeah, thank goodness they fixed the Democratic Party since the 60s, right? John, I know you're not as much of a fan of the newsroom and things like that, but do you think then that the trial of the Chicago 7 is a good or better depiction of protests and that sort of thing? And also, where do you think Sorkin fails in his depiction of the protests and the protesters in the film?
One thing that I found interesting was in the shot where the defendants are all walking into the courthouse for the first time and all the people are on either side, the signs make it clear that one side is pro the Chicago 7 and one side is anti, but they're all pumping their fist in the same like rhythm, and they're all saying the whole world is watching. And so it's this weird, they're all painted exactly the same. And so the only way that you can tell what their opinions are is by the signs. And it's just a very strange way to depict all of them as identical. So it's better, but it doesn't actually like address any of the political ideology involved there. And one thing that I don't really know anything about the actual events. I've done some Wikipedia searching and stuff since I watched the movie, but also the fact that at no point does anybody address the fact that Vietnam is not just bad because American soldiers are dying. It's also bad because American imperial military forces are slaughtering people in a country that we have had no right to be in because we ideologically didn't like what they did. And so it's just like nobody addresses that issue with the Vietnam War. They're all just like writing down the names of the American dead, and then at the end they just read that whole list of like 5,000 names. It's just like, it's weird.
I mean, I definitely agree with John about that last point, which is like wildly historically inaccurate, and one of many things in the movie that are like the thing about the everybody pumping their fist the same way and all that. I totally missed that when I watched the movie, but I'm not at all surprised, you know, because that's a very Sorkin thing, and that's something I could even sort of halfway forgive, because like the effect of a lot of his the way he writes, you know, the way he does dialogue, certainly, it's like, you know, it's almost like you're watching like a Noel Coward musical or something, you know, where you have people who, okay, they have different voices, but I mean, like it's like they're singing a song together in counterpoint, you know, and so having that, like, it's almost like the chorus in the Greek tragedy or something, you know, that they're all, you know, that they're all sort of going to be doing stuff in unison. It's almost like it's like people, you know, like they're part of a musical where all the characters start singing together, you know, like that sort of makes sense for Sorkin's style. But I think the other thing that John points to is right and is really important and does really speak to the ideological limits of what Sorkin's doing here, because he can't process the idea that anybody objected to the Vietnam War for any reasons except the Americans who were dying there, that it wouldn't be limited to that. And in fact, in the actual trial, like they also, you know, they were also reading the names of dead, you know, Vietnamese people. They had a Viet Cong flag on the defendant's table, and obviously Sorkin's, you know, not going to do any of that stuff. And it's also very, very telling, right? And I think this gets back to the earlier point, because think, okay, why is it that he's got a more positive depiction in a complicated way, right? Like, I mean, he clearly does depict them as being ridiculous in some ways, whatever, but he clearly has more positive feelings about these Vietnam era protesters than he does about any of the protesters that we saw in the West Wing of the newsroom. And I think part of the reason, I think what you were saying, Sam, about how, you know, the sort of ideas like, well, the Democratic Party, you know, maybe there's even a sort of halfway acknowledgement, although he can barely get himself to do even that in the movie, that, you know, it wasn't great in the Johnson era, but whatever, it's clearly fixed itself since then. Now it's good. uh, and and I think that that's tied together, and it's also the fact that these protests were so long ago is tied in, because I think the part of the reason that he has a more positive attitude is that he thinks, okay, these are the people who basically grow up to become good liberals, right? You know, that like maybe they were a little extreme at this part of their lives, but these are basically good people. These grow up to be the good guys in Aaron Sorkin things set in the 90s and 2000s, you know, when they're in their 40s or 50s.
Right.
So I think it is like really telling, right? Like that, you know, I mean, not everybody, like the movie portrays like Jerry Rubin as just being kind of a ridiculous clown. But Abby Hoffman, the movie likes, and Tom Hayden, the movie likes. But it is, although also like it portrays like 1968 Tom Hayden as being probably more moderate than Tom Hayden was in like the 90s, right? You know, like he basically, you know, because in actual fact, Tom Hayden did, you know, soften over time, and he became a Democratic, you know, state legislator in California. But you know, he's a pretty left-wing one, right? And it, like, I don't know, I felt like in the movie when he's arguing with Abby Hoffman, like I felt like that Tom Hayden was like probably all ready to like support Elizabeth Warren already in like 1968, and so and I think that I think that would be my biggest complaint about the movie, that it's like, so part of it, you know, and I mean we could talk about all sorts of like more of like smaller criticisms, but I think overall, like, it was a movie that's very that like I think worked in a lot of ways as you know, as a movie. It was fun to watch. You know, there was some good atmosphere. It did have a basically sympathetic portrayal of these guys and what happened to them. But the problem is, because of Sorkin's kind of liberalism, he can't bring himself to have a positive portrayal of these guys, or certainly not to, you know, not to think of them as smart and interesting, if they have a worldview that's to the left of like Aaron Sorkin style Clintonite liberalism. So he basically like retcons Abby Hoffman as a, you know, Aaron Sorkin Clintonite liberal, you know, like who just had kind of theatrical tactics. Like to a remarkable extent. Like I remember, you know, Nathan Robinson posted a bunch of screenshots of the transcript of Abby Hoffman's actual testimony at the trial, which is of course night and day different from what you saw in the movie, because he was you know, I mean, he was like a sort of you know, zany and absurdist, but like basically a revolutionary communist, you know, in what he was saying in the actual trial. Whereas the Sorkin version of Abby Hoffman, like he's all ready to vote for, you know, Elizabeth Warren in 1969. Like he actually puts this line of dialogue in Hoffman's mouth about how he doesn't have a problem with the system. He just thinks that bad people are running it. Which, I mean, that line kind of tells you everything.
Yeah, we peacefully dismember our American government every 4 years.
Yeah, which by the way, having spent, and I'll it's embarrassing, but I'll cop to this. Having spent way too much time many years ago watching The West Wing, you know, reruns.
I like, just finished the whole series in 2021. Shit.
But okay, so you'll remember that line about how we overthrow our government every 4 years. That's actually a line that he gives Donna in a Bartlett Get Out the Vote rally in a West Wing episode. And he also gives it to Abby Hoffman, testified at the Chicago 7 trial.
I mean, they're basically the same person, right? We were just talking about that, John, too. He's notorious for overusing his lines. He's terrible about that. And also, John, I wanted to bring you in on this, because we were also talking about the softening out of these real-life characters, but also the Academy is nominated now, Sacha Baron Cohen, for his portrayal of Abby Hoffman. What do you think, John, about this reception of these characters and the way that Sorkin, you know, has portrayed them?
You know, in regards to like Oscar noms and things like that, I get it. I mean, it's a functionally good movie. The acting is good. The cinematography is good. It's just it just, I don't know if whitewashes is the right word. It just sort of washes out the politics of the actual true events, which is it's a bummer. And so it's like this movie could have been something really cool and crazy and unique in American Hollywood cinematography, but it wasn't because it's Aaron Sorkin. But I think that Sacha Baron Cohen was good.
Mm. Yeah, no, I mean, Sacha Baron Cohen did a really good job playing the role. It's just a shame that by the end of the movie they had to make what he was saying so stupid. I think that Aaron Sorkin, again, he's good. He's good at writing a certain kind of dialogue, which has again this effect that's it is almost like watching a musical or something. And it's a specific thing. It's not intended to be realistic, but I mean it's something that he's good at. I think that sometimes there are aspects of it that can be a little cheesy and clunky. So in that West Wing episode that we watched, I was really noticing it probably more than I had the previous time that I watched that episode, that it's there's that classic Chekhov thing about the gun on the mantelpiece. You show it at the beginning,
Right.
and it has to go off at the end. And it's it does kind of feel like, okay, if it's Aaron Sorkin telling the story, you have to spend 5 minutes saying, "Ooh, look at this gun on the mantelpiece. Do you see the gun? Yeah, there's the gun." And then half an hour later, man, remember that gun on the mantelpiece? And then the slow motion, walking into the living room to take the gun off the mantelpiece and fire it. So there were a lot of things like that in that episode that Mrs. Landingham tells him that when he's made a decision, he'll turn his head and put his hands in his pockets and smile. And so then at the end, you have to see him, they do the, turn his head and, and put his hands in his pocket and smile. That comes right after.
Not only do they have him put his hands in his pocket and smile, but they have Leo, his advisor guy, explicitly go, "Watch this," and then they have him do it as the camera spins around him. And it works emotionally, but the whole time I'm just rolling my eyes into the back of my head.
He could definitely take it down a notch, and that would be better, right? Right. Especially because it comes right after another thing like that. Because CJ told him earlier where the New York Times medical correspondent's going to be, who he should take the first question from. And so you see him look at the crowd, you do the close-up of that guy, because after twice earlier in the episode, she told him exactly where he's going to be sitting. But, you do the close-up of the old man, and so you can, this must be the medical correspondent. It's again, I think, yeah, I think just aesthetically, you could trust the audience a little bit more to put some of these things together without calling quite as much attention to it, as he's doing. But I think those are relatively small criticisms. Although I think sometimes they do interact with the political dimension. One thing I did find a little ridiculous about the trial of the Chicago 7 was that I'm pretty sure that the actual Black Panthers didn't wear the leather jackets and sunglasses and berets 24/7 like every day all the time, that they could never go to anything or do anything without wearing the leather jackets and sunglasses and berets. But it sort of seems like you could have, some Black guys in the audience who are just wearing civilian clothes, but also seem to know him, and the audience would kind of put together, those must be the other Black Panthers, who know Fred Hampton. And so that, which is mostly an aesthetic criticism, but it is also a little bit political because it's a little bit of a cartoonish depiction, and it's one that also I think says something about Sorkin's version of liberalism, because everything that you hear from Fred Hampton is very one-dimensionally about racism as somebody in 2020, right, is going to understand that issue. That it's he's just the guy, you know, it's basically like he's there so he can tell like the white SDS people that they don't know how bad it is to be black.
Yeah.
And it's a severe oversimplification of what the Panthers were about. And, you know, and I know, like, say what you want about Judas and the Black Messiah, but at least, you know, you did actually get shocking, like several times in dialogue, you know, shockingly accurate depictions of like the sort of fuller political vision that they stood for.
Right. I feel like a lot of people who are liberal, they're like, oh, you would love the West Wing. You know what I mean? So that's kind of, and I feel like that's kind of something that has repeated itself a little bit, because you get swept up in the motion and the good writing, and then you read more about the story, and then certain things piss you off about Aaron Sorkin's portrayal of it. So I guess that's why. I mean, I love it. I thought it was a great movie, but again, I also, like you said, Ben, have to add those asterisks that like, he takes a lot of liberties and he has a certain worldview, but it's really well done.
And I have a lot more problems with the worldview than I do with the liberties. I mean, it's fine to sort of have. I'm fine with making dramatic choices that don't quite line up with, you know, with what happened, but, you know, but sort of maybe convey something about it. It's the you know, the fact that that it can only be about the American war dead, that the fanatically right-wing anti-communist prosecutor, you know, stands up to honor the dead at the end, you know, like that's the sort of goofy liberalism getting to the point where at that moment it stops being such a good, you know, good movie because it just, if you know anything about it all, about this at all, like there's a lot that I'm willing to be, okay, fine, whatever, it's a movie, but like it's hard to suspend disbelief for that.
John Lynn and Ben Burgis, thank you guys so much for joining me. I can't wait to talk to you soon.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
And finally, as we enter the last week before the 2021 Academy Awards, can we finally admit that some of the nomination categories are bullshit? This year, Lakeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya are both nominated for their performances in Judas and the Black Messiah. Completely deserved. They were both outstanding in their roles. So who did they nominate as a lead and who did they nominate as a supporting actor? Well, apparently Judas and the Black Messiah didn't have a lead actor because both Stanfield and Kaluuya are nominated in the supporting category, pitted against each other. 10 years ago, a similar situation happened when Christian Bale was nominated for his performance in The Fighter, a movie in which he was clearly a co-lead. I wouldn't be too upset about it if it weren't for the fact that Bale, being shoehorned in the supporting category, robbed Andrew Garfield of a nomination for his performance in The Social Network, a genuinely great supporting role. Why would the Academy pull this with Bale? Well, because of Hollywood politics. The Fighter came out in 2010, the same year that Colin Firth gave the performance of a lifetime in the lead role in The King's Speech. The team behind The Fighter knew that Bale could never win against Firth in the Best Actor category, so they tried to pass him off as a supporting actor. Andrew Garfield be damned. So how many great actual supporting roles have been overlooked this year because Judas and the Black Messiah can't figure out who was the lead? A well-written and acted supporting role is almost an art in its own right. The connective tissue tying the screenplay together and giving our leads new and exciting dialogue opportunities. When the Oscars can just nominate anyone in any category, it almost makes you think the entire show is meaningless. Now wouldn't that be something? Okay, that's our show. I'd like to thank John Lynn and Ben Burgis for joining me this week. I'll be on Wizard World's social media sites talking about Falcon and the Winter Soldier this Saturday, so make sure you check that out, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you, folks.